All right. Give it 1 second here while we go live on the different streaming services. We have a couple attendees that are trickling in. So we'll let that roll in. And while they're doing that, I'm going to start my welcome. So first of all, thank you everyone for joining us. My name is Alex Standers. I'm going to be your host today on behalf of BVoIP and MSP Initiative. Um, I am joined here by Brendan Mitchell, who I'm going to give a chance to introduce himself in just a minute here. I want to go through a couple of housekeeping items and then give Brandon the proper intro he deserves, and then talk all things Threatlocker. So first and foremost, it is a crazy month for MSP Initiative. Obviously, here with MSP Initiative Live, I'm sure you've heard it plenty of times. You tune in every week or twice a week. But we've got two parties coming up in just over a week here, which is crazy for us, but should be a lot of fun. So I'm going to jump over and just share my screen real quick. So for starters, we have the PAX 8 Beyond party in Denver, Colorado. So anybody who will be joining PAX 8 Beyond, you're not at PAX 8 Beyond. That's crazy, first of all, because that's a massive, massive, massive event at this point. But if you are not and you are in the Colorado area and somehow have not working with PAX 8 and going to the event, feel free to join us and attend. Should be a great time. We actually rented out a pretty incredible venue. So this venue is a historic country music hall. So think big open honky tonk style music hall. We're gonna have mechanical bull, games, music, drinks, the works. So that will be a great time. After that, we have Kaseya DattoCon Europe. So this event was amazing last year. If you did not get a chance to attend this and you were at Dublin last year, you seriously missed out. But the good news is everyone loved it so much. We are actually repeating the same thing after the venue that we already absolutely loved has gone through renovations and is even better than before. So we'll actually go ahead and show that real quick. So this venue used to be a historic theater, as you can tell from the beautiful roof and architecture there. They converted this thing into a two-story sports pub with the largest screen in Europe. It is just absolutely an amazing place to go to. They have a Michelin star chef on staff, beautiful space, great drinks, possibly a speakeasy somewhere in the building. Definitely some really nice touches. Will be a really great time. So if you do not get to attend, and if you are in Europe and feel like being in Dublin, or are in Ireland and feel like being in Dublin during that time frame, make sure to head over to mspinitiative.com, register for the event. All of our party registrations are on there. We have plenty more coming up for the year all over the world. And I'm happy to say that we have our friends at Threatlocker on, I think, every single one of those. So you guys have been great. Love the support for the community. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Brandon and let him say hello, and we'll dive into all things Threatlocker.
All right. Hey guys. So I'm Brandon. I am an MSP sales rep with Threatlocker. I've very much enjoyed my career at Threatlocker up to this point. Worked with many MSPs in helping them onboard Threatlocker as a partner, and so I feel I kind of bring a lot of knowledge from the vendor side into what we see is happening in the channel. So I was excited to kind of join in this opportunity to have kind of a live conversation. And actually, the next major event I will be attending is PAX 8 Beyond. So I will be there myself.
Perfect.
So yeah, so we'll all see each other there. So but yeah, if you want to get going, let's get into it, Alec.
Perfect. Yeah. So first thing I'll ask is, was this your first MSP/channel role?
It was, yes, yes.
Awesome.
And in fact, uh, interesting thing for me personally, my first role in IT or cybersecurity at all.
Awesome.
Threatlocker was um, completely out of left field for me. I'd worked for many years as a sales rep in other industries and other capacities, and had come to a point in my previous role where it was time for a change and kind of uh, things had plateaued, right? And you kind of know
Mhm.
when it's time to move personally onto the next step. And so I was looking for other job opportunities, what the next step in my career would be. And I actually had 6 different job offers lined up when Threatlocker kind of came out of the blue, and I almost disregarded them at the time, and I'm glad I didn't, because I ended up taking the interview just on a whim one morning, and that ended up obviously being the direction I took, and I am very, very grateful for that because it's changed my entire life, my entire trajectory, and it's been an awesome ride.
That's awesome. Yeah, we've had the pleasure of working with your team, and it's been incredible to watch just the absolute skyrocketing you guys have done. Obviously, you were on the clock a couple of years ago, and we didn't really see Threatlocker as much, and now all of a sudden, it's you can't go anywhere without seeing Threatlocker. It's a pretty cool transformation to watch, and I'm giving credit to Danny and Shane and the rest of the team at just kind of the presence you guys have developed. I will warn you, your first job in the channel, that's the one that gets you. You just can't leave,
Yeah.
unfortunately. Um, I tried. I did go to the enterprise, and I came right back. It's there's something different with it. It's just the way that we work with the partners. There's no other industry like it, and it's really special. So welcome. And yeah, you picked a great company. So it's a very cool journey. I mean, you guys, we kind of touched on it briefly before the call started, but you guys have been on that crazy trajectory and the growth. And I mean, I remember talking to your team one time, and it was exhausting having the conversation about how many events you guys were doing that month.
Hmm.
And then we zoomed out and talked about the year, and I just the pace at which you guys keep is just crazy. And then on top of that, to be developing the product in the way you guys are, and I know you guys just did a major rollout. Do you want to touch on that a little bit and some of the new reveals at Threatlocker?
Yeah, sure. And I will say, Threatlocker, just to kind of touch on what you were talking about with the events, I mean, we have definitely made a concerted effort to be everywhere that we possibly can. The channel has driven a lot of that explosive growth, and we're extremely grateful to the MSP community for that. As we continue to expand, we're gonna you guys are gonna see a lot of innovations and a lot of changes coming. Um, as we continue to kind of roll out the platform and further develop the platform. But it's really MSPs that have driven a lot of the explosive growth up to this point. And that's actually kind of a good segue because one of the major pushes that we have made recently has been into the EDR and MDR side of things, right? So, and that is largely at the behest of our partners, and of those partners, largely at the behest of those MSP partners that we have long-standing relationships with. So, Threatlocker, as everyone knows, we are a implementation of zero trust, right? So the entire core goal of Threatlocker, if you were to boil it down into a nutshell, is to move um, the security conversation away from default allow to default deny. So moving away from allowing whatever, everything into your environment and then trying to discern the bad and keep the bad out, and moving towards a paradigm where we give you controls over what you allow in the first place. And that implementation of that zero trust, or that's kind of a buzzword now, so that least privilege or default deny philosophy, right? So that is the core of Threatlocker. That is still the bread and butter of what we're doing. That's still our main aim as a company. Um, but largely at the behest of our partners. Our partners are clamoring for, yeah, but we want reporting, we want response capabilities. Threatlocker, you're awesome. You do the thing, you block the stuff, and we love you for it. Um, but we still would like to know, right, when something is potentially occurring. And
Yep.
and we have the ability to do that. We had all of that telemetry data that we were collecting. So that was what Threatlocker Detect was born out of. Our EDR was born out of our partners basically driving this. Threatlocker, we love what you're doing on the zero trust side, but let us get some more information on what's happening in real time. And that's how Threatlocker Detect came to fruition, and we've continued to build on that, and it's been a huge success. So the latest develop okay. The latest development for those who aren't quite completely up to date is we now have a Cyber Hero MDR team, which we're extremely excited about. So that is our um, world-class Cyber Hero support team that everybody knows and loves, our
Yep.
24/7, 366. This year it's the leap year. team, we now have a special group, a subset of that cyber hero support team that is specially trained in incident response and indicators of compromise and threat detection, and they now helm our dedicated MDR team. And we have now put that forward to our partners. It's been awesome, an awesome rollout there. The main thing there is again, zero trust is still our bread and butter, right? And
Yep.
and what we've been saying for the longest time is when you implement an effective zero trust framework on your endpoints, your EDR tools and your MDR tools and your everything DR tools are going to be relatively quiet. They're going to have a lot less to do. That remains true even when it's Threatlocker's own in-house stuff, right? So we're um, we're able to put forward that MDR to our partners at $2 a seat when Threatlocker is in secured mode on those
Wow.
same endpoints because it cuts down so dramatically on the noise that we see. So yeah, we're pretty excited about that. We're also rolling out O365 integration. That's the big development for us. The ability to manage Microsoft Windows Defender from within the ThreatLocker portal,
Mhm.
and then obviously we announced that ThreatLocker Unified Bundle. So from the partnership side of things, for those partners or prospective partners who want to do everything Threatlocker, which we hope is the case, um, then we're putting forward a really awesome bundle on that side to incorporate all of our features on the zero trust side, plus the detection side, plus the MDR, and give you management over the approval process as well, and all that we're calling Threatlocker Unified.
That's awesome. No, I mean, it's funny. We did a bus tour years ago with some of your team, and I remember, and it's always stuck with me. One of the reps, I heard them talking to an MSP, and the MSP was a little more old school in their cybersecurity approach, and they just kind of said, I don't get it. Why would I want to work with their locker? Like, I already have a bunch of stuff in place, and they said, look, when you turn the faucet on in the sink, and you flip it to one side, and it's really, really hot, and that's not good, and you flip it the other way, and it's really, really cold, and that's not good either. We're going to put you on one side and we're going to slowly move it to the middle where you have a right balance, right? You're letting
Hmm.
the right stuff in, you're keeping the bad stuff out. And that's always stuck with me. And it's funny because, you guys have obviously blown up with that and that is your bread and butter, but it's cool to see that because you guys were already, surface, on the surface level, that was what we were seeing. But on the back end, you guys were able to already tap into all of those different areas that, now you're able to offer that out to the partners, which is great. Um, and I think it kind of defeats most of the time when we hear, oh, we expand out our offering, we're doing more. It's always the should I put all my eggs in one basket conversation, right? Is kind of the next one that naturally
Right,
comes.
right,
Especially around security, right? If I put everything in one area, am I risking, one failure taking so much out? But I feel like because you guys were already doing a lot of those pieces, um, it's not a far cry away from. It's not something experimental. It's not something new. It's really part of the bread and butter of what you were already doing. It's just under
right.
the surface, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, exactly. We moved into the EDR and MDR space on Threatlocker terms, right? So we're still doing it in our own fashion, right? Our detection and our MDR is still based on really that data that we're collecting from the control side. So we have that visibility into the applications being run in the environment. We have that visibility into the network, inbound network traffic. We have that visibility into, with our storage control, with the file movement, the file reads, writes, moves, and deletes. And so it was a natural kind of move in that direction. We were always hesitant as an organization to move in to the detection side of things because of what you just expressed, because we wanted to make sure that the zero trust was hammered down and that was always going to be the focus, and that really our end goal again is trying to move people towards that framework, that zero trust framework, and that hasn't changed. Um, but it was like, hey, we're already pulling in all this data. Why aren't we not doing anything with it? Right. So you combine all of those telemetry data sets with the Windows event log and now like with Windows Defender, and now you've got a full-fledged DDR capability. So that was why we moved in that direction. Um, I would say though that you kind of bring up an important point. Um, in my conversations with MSPs, and at this point, man, well, hundreds and hundreds of MSPs. I've personally onboarded uh, dozens at this point, approaching 100 MSPs with Threatlocker, and I've had many, many, many conversations centered around how the MSP functions from the security perspective.
Yep.
And the MSPs that are successful with Threatlocker really do embrace that perspective shift. It really is a perspective shift. It is a moving away from the trying to detect everything before it gets in and moving towards the we want to have control over the environments, right?
Yep.
And that is fundamentally what it comes down to. You can put out detection tools and you can have different flavors of detection tools, but at the end of the day, ultimately where we feel cybersecurity needs to go is um, allowing only those things that you need. That like our tagline, allowing only what you need, blocking everything else by default. It really is that simple. It sounds simple. It's people are afraid of implementing that. People are intimidated by that. They obviously one of the big objections or one of the big hesitancies that we receive is the bandwidth, the workload, or the maintenance. Um, but in my conversation with MSPs, I'm quick to remind them at the end of the day, it's a tool. It is a
Hmm.
tool. It is not Threatlocker isn't forcing you anything upon you that you wouldn't be comfortable with. This is a direction that you decide you want to move in because you understand this is where security needs to go, and Threatlocker is the tool that allows you to get there in a practical and efficient manner.
Yep.
But ultimately, you decide. You decide for your end users what applications they run, how they run them, how strict the rules are, how lenient the rules are, how long the learning mode goes out to, when you actually secure, and what parameters you secure. So at the end of the day, our job when we provide support to MSPs is um, is to get the MSP to the point where they're comfortable with that. They're comfortable with that implementation. They're comfortable with that rollout. Because Threatlocker on its own isn't going to do anything. It's you guys as the MSP rolling it out in an effective manner. And a lot of times it's that perspective shift. It's not viewing it as a ticket to be completed as quickly as possible. It's viewing it as an opportunity each time something gets blocked, viewing it as an opportunity to be like, what is this application? Is it
Yep.
actually what it says it is? Do I actually need it in my environment? Even if it's legit, do we need 7 different versions of this tool, or should we really be reducing this down to 2 for that organization? And allowing you guys a chance to clean up that environment and just get control is really what it is, what it comes down to.
A little bit of spring cleaning, just kind of
Yeah,
is it
yeah,
necessary? I mean, do I need another area that could be the vulnerability? I mean, that's
yeah. And who
right.
uses it? Who's going to use this application under what circumstances, under what conditions, and all of those things come into play when you're looking at implementing that zero trust framework. And then when you do that, and you really, instead of just trying to knock out that ticket, so to speak, as quickly as possible, when you take a couple extra moments to think about what it is you're actually allowing in your environment and how, if you want to allow it in, how you do so, that is what makes all the difference. And the partners that we see that are really successful with Threatlocker come to intuitively understand that.
Absolutely. No, I mean, I can definitely understand that. I think for one of the big rebuttals I heard back when zero trust first started, and obviously it's like anything, right? When a new framework, a new mindset is introduced, people are going to be, I think, cautious to it.
Hmm.
And I think one of the big things was, oh, well, my clients are going to hate this, right? Because my
Right.
clients like the freedom, and it's kind of like MFA, right? None of us liked MFA when it rolled out. It was annoying. It was another step. I had to do something to turn on my computer.
It's
But
still
when it's
annoying.
rolled out,
Right.
it is still
But,
annoying
but but
for
we
sure.
understand the value now, right? We understand why it's in place.
Exactly. Right. And how many times have we heard about some rogue application? Somebody had a music streaming application that wasn't
Hmm.
updated, some random file program, etc., on the back of the computer that nobody really paid attention to because Bill just used it to listen to his audiobooks. And now all of a sudden
Yep.
that's the point of intrusion.
Yep. That's exactly it. And a lot of this it sounds so obvious, but it's also not at the same time, right? There's you can kind of tell there's oftentimes a eureka moment with MSPs, um, especially like startup newer smaller MSPs, right? Or they're just kind of, and they're like, yeah. um, our end users are operating on work computers. Why are they treating them as if they're their personal computers, right? It's they hired us as the MSP to protect them, and they're ultimately their own worst enemy, right? Their habits, their Wild West use of applications. And so Threatlocker isn't forcing anything upon those end users, but is providing the MSP a tool to rein in that end user behavior. And especially if they ultimately came to you to protect them essentially from themselves a lot of the times at the end of the day, Threatlocker is a really good way to implement that and to
Yep.
move some of those changes along. And so, hey, we don't have anything against you playing games, but you necessarily need it on the workstation. Do that on your personal computer. Keep it off the work, the work network.
Yep.
Let's really, you know, keep the work environment to those things that you guys actually need to be productive in your jobs. And that's going to not only help keep you guys safe from a security perspective, but also clean up your environment, keep the machines running smoothly. And it's just going to be a win-win for everybody. You know,
Yeah.
the MSP then has a lot less to deal with. And when the perspective is taken on that level, as opposed to, oh man, the end users, they're going to hate this, they're never going to go for it. It's like, well, a lot of times it's, have you had the conversation? Like,
100%.
try it, have the conversations first, see how that goes, and then we can go from there. And it's kind of like an easing people into things. You can start with some of the easy wins and we can roll out from there. Nobody's saying that you have to roll out Threatlocker and all of a sudden it's going to block everything. Nobody's saying that. There is a way to do this and implement it practically, both for us to the MSP, but also from the MSP to the end user. And that a lot of that just comes down to setting the expectations properly.
No, so listen, I agree. I think you hit on something important there, and I'm trying to take notes on the back end so I can touch on stuff for you. One is you touched on it with some of the newer MSPs, and I think that's an important one that I want to hit on first. Is I think when new MSPs come in, it's that scramble of I just got to get whatever business is out there, and I got to
Right.
take whatever it is. So you're very hesitant to upset the apple cart.
Yep.
And where I think Threatlocker can be a great tool for you, you also can be hesitant to jump in with it because of, oh well, my client might get up. I don't want to upset Julie in accounting. She loves to play Candy Crush on her computer every day. Or Mark loves to stream movies on on during the day. And like you said, those things are still okay. You can still do it on your personal, on your cell phone, on your personal computer. Shouldn't be doing games at work anyway, but that's neither here nor there. 9 times out of 10, it's not the owner, it's not the person who's actually make the decision to keep you or get rid of you or pay your bills. That's going to be the one that you're going to find doing behaviors that's eventually going to be upset about you taking away the ability to do that.
Right.
So that's the first one, and the second one is that the new MSP. The one thing that I think I've seen with our MSPs time and time again, I'm sure you can probably echo this, is when you make that transition from being hungry for whatever's out there to you've got enough that you feel stable and you feel comfortable and you can start to be a little bit more choosy about what makes the most sense, and
Yep.
you figure out, in that journey you figure out what's a good customer, what's a bad customer. And in that you'll kind of grow with those good customers and you will divest hopefully your time, and eventually you'll completely away from the bad customers, and you'll get a little more choosy about who you end up bringing in. So we grew out of an MSP ourselves, and we had some horror stories, and we had some great clients. We had some clients that were heartbreaking to let go of as we got rid of the MSP, but we had others that were absolute nightmares we couldn't get away from fast enough, because the truth is, just as an MSP, your job is to be that consultant. You have to be that
Yep.
advisor. You have to tell them that you're doing what's right for their business. And if they're not going to listen to you, there is a point where it's worth walking away. And I know it's hard to hear that and it's hard to think about that, because when you're in that survival mode of, okay, I've now quit my job and I'm now starting this tech business and I'm just trying to get whatever money I can get to put food on the table and everything else, pay that car payment, it's hard to think about that. But the reality is, the client that's not going to listen to you about things as basic as, hey, these applications could be dangerous. We shouldn't be running them, are probably the same ones that you shouldn't be, taking in,
Yep.
because the reality is, as an MSP, this it's not getting any easier in our field. And the reality is, compliance has come closer and closer and closer to our industry. And we're seeing a lot of, CIS, we're seeing a lot of different frameworks that are coming out now that are focusing in on safeguarding really. But in the long run, you are held liable in the back end, right? Same with like HIPAA compliance.
Yep.
If a client violates HIPAA compliancy, they're going to turn around and ask the MSP, what did you know? What did you protect them from? Did you advise them against this? I see you ran a HIPAA scan. Did you enforce that they had, there's all different pieces that they're going to hit you with. Um, you have to know your liability and understand that and decide, is it worth it to move forward with that client that doesn't want to kill Jen's access to Candy Crush, or do you want the client that's going to understand it and say, I hired Brandon because Brandon's my
Right.
MSP now, and Brandon knows what's best for me, and I trust Brandon with my cybersecurity, so I'm going to follow whatever he tells me to do in that cybersecurity piece, peace of mind, because now I don't have to worry about it because he's taking care of it.
Right.
Yeah, so I mean
You,
that's that for me. It's been a huge journey that we watched a lot with MSP partners.
yeah, and I think we're completely on the same page there. That comes to the vendor perspective, like looking into the channel, right? Like the stuff that we see. Like you can almost visualize like the evolution of an MSP. And I've had against all those things, I can just relate back to so many conversations I've had with different MSPs at different stages, right? And you
Yep.
can almost
You can
pinpoint
almost drop them into the
exactly,
different.
yeah, exactly where they are in the process. And it, it, so Australia is interestingly, I believe, I don't have the latest up-to-date information, but it's our second largest market, I do believe. Um,
Hmm.
the
Same.
the American MSP market is the most mature MSP market in the world by
Hmm.
far, um, and but Australia is not too far behind. And Australia is probably, I would say, this is just a personal venture, but I would say Australia's MSP market is more mature than the American market in the sense of regulation and compliance from the top down. So they have something
Yep.
there called Essential 8. And Essential 8 basically drives the MSP, it forces their hand. And it holds them liable essentially for damages if anything occurs, like in a very legal sense. So that is driving a lot of demand for Threatlocker in that market because they don't really have a choice. They have to implement some form of zero trust. Um, and it's just a matter of kind of with who, right? And so Threatlocker has really exploded down there in that market, and we're very very happy with the results that we've seen in Australia and APAC in general. But all of that is to say that the MSPs there have kind of been forced to have a reckoning there with the security that they implement for their end users because of that top-down compliance. The American market's a little bit further behind in that regard because it's more of like a heavily suggested but still voluntary thing, right? Whereas in Australia, it's
Yeah.
more it's mandated. They need to. Um, and so, in that regard, you kind of see the Australian MSPs following suit in what you were just saying. They do take more of the stance of, hey, end user, this is what you need because this is what we need to implement in order to say that we're doing our job properly in order to protect you.
Hmm.
And it is, you're right. And it is very difficult for a startup MSP that's just getting off the ground to look at any customer that's paying them money and paying their bills and say, like, drop them.
Yep.
Like any small business owner of any kind is gonna have a really hard time doing that where they're getting off the ground. I mean, that's your revenue, right? And Threatlocker is very cognizant of that, very aware of that. But you do see as you go through that evolution, as you go through that maturity process, you do see the MSPs that we talk to that kind of have now a grip on their business model and have a grip on their demographic and their area of operation, where they're saying, yeah, we are okay with letting those customers go
Yep.
because they're not adhering to our advising. We're consulting with them and they're not taking our advice. They're not moving along with what we want. And yeah, they're still paying us X amount of dollars per month, but in the end, they're a liability. They're causing us problems. They're causing us IT problems, and what we're getting from them financially is not enough to keep them on board. And you see that kind of that shuffle of the client set to the MSP getting to where they're like, yeah, this is a lot easier to maintain. We could probably be getting 10, 15% more revenue if we held on to every single paying customer possible, but we'd rather do without that and have better profit margins and much easier to deal with and maintain customers that understand the value we're putting forward and have much easier lives because of it, right? And that's
100%.
ultimately how that MSP will then eventually grow, because then they're going to also go and find the right clientele for them. And then
No, agreed.
the reputation precedes itself, and then they expand from there. So yeah, we see that, and we're very well aware of that, and we do try our best to work with everybody at every stage of the process, even those small MSPs that are getting off the ground. But yeah, it can be difficult because if you have end users that aren't understanding the value that you're putting forward, where do you go from there?
100%. Yeah, it's funny because you quickly brought me back to, I worked at Datto previously, and I remember we had a partner there who every single new prospect he went into, it was, you're going to get a Datto. And some of them didn't like the pricing of Dattos. They would push back. And his rebuttal was, hey, look, this is what it's going to cost you for downtime. And if they didn't bite at that point, they still said, we don't want the Datto. They would actually sit down with them and they'd say, okay, well, here's what we calculate it's going to cost you. So we want you to go get an insurance policy for the amount that an average downtime would be. And then we're also going to have you sign off on a waiver that waives us of any liability for anything that happens due to ransomware and the inability to back up and the time that your business will be down. Here's how long we think it would take to get you back up and running, what that process would look like, getting you back up and running from scratch. Um, so I mean that's another evolution of it, and you do see that with MSPs. I think sometimes that is kind of the third fork in the path, right? It's like, well, at the very least, talk to a lawyer, understand your liability, understand what you can do to protect yourself. There's a lot of great, Monjor, there's Fred Gross, there's a lot of great, um, legal partners out there that you can partner with now and talk to in the space that can really advise you in these areas. But yeah, I mean, the reality is, without something in place, you're putting yourselves up for a rough road ahead. I mean, you touched on Australia, and that is an incredible market. I've been lucky enough that we've been out there since 2015, just a year into the development of BVoIP, or a year into the launch of BVoIP, and they do really push ahead. And I think some of that comes down to just the cultural differences between America and Australia, right? America is a little bit more pushback against heavy regulation, which is a great thing in a lot of areas, and it's tough too because you understand the need for it in some areas, right? Because I think there's one of the arguments I heard the other day in a community call was there's no real definition of what an MSP is, and anyone can just raise their hand and say I'm an MSP now because I resell a couple products, and there's no certification, there's no real registration to it. I just spin up an LLC and I'm an MSP now. So there is that factor that's a
There's
little
truth
bit
to
tough.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's scary too because I could say I'm an MSP now. I have no idea what I'm doing. I'm YouTubing how to roll out most of these tools. So there is some of that that'll be helped and fixed by some regulation, but at the same point, you also don't want it to hurt the people who are out there doing it right and cut into their
Right.
profit margins because it's already a hard business, right? It's grueling hours. It's nights. It's weekends. It's holidays. It's all
And
those things. It's service based.
another thing that I have seen that is related to, and it just popped in my head too, that is kind of related to what we're talking about. Man, I've had many conversations with MSPs where they have one or a couple of like darling customers, right? And like their entire business is essentially predicated on these, either this one or this two or three or maybe four those customers, they're golden customers, right?
Yep.
And on one hand, so and this kind of gets into my personal experience with many MSPs. On one hand, when we're looking at onboarding that MSP, right, as a partner with Threatlocker, those customers can make onboarding really easy. on one hand,
Mhm.
because if you get that one customer or those two customers interested in Threatlocker and they see the value in it, and typically those customers are the ones that will listen to their MSP and follow through with the advising that they're being given, um, then that is that's a pathway to partnership right there. The thing that has always kind of frustrated me a little bit about that, and has always been in the back of my head, even when a partnership is onboarded and successful, is that um, there is a insinuation there that the smaller guys, the SMBs, the 5 to 15 seat small and medium sized businesses somehow don't need or won't be receptive to something like ThreatLock or the implementation of zero trust. And that's always bothered me a little bit because um, it is precisely those businesses that don't think they are a target that are targets.
Yep.
And it's it is even when we're talking about when again when a partnership onboarding with an MSP is successful at ThreatLocker, I sometimes feel like those SMBs, the mom and pop shops, the Main Street America, right, are being kind of forgotten about and not included in the best security practices because they're seen as cheap or they're seen as unwilling to change, unwilling to listen. And there is truth to that. And we hear a lot of what the MSPs go through. But also part of it is, when's the last time you held that tough conversation, right?
Agreed. Yeah. So it's funny because this is such a story of the VoIP history that we tell all the time. So that point of view is very near and dear to my heart. So we had a client that was a small, I think it was either dental or doctor's practice in up the Northeast, and this doctor was not huge, but we did well enough, and we managed computers and basic cybersecurity and things like that. And the team, after running an assessment at the annual, noticed they were wildly out of compliance. Went in and said, "Hey, look, this is a big issue. Here's all the things you need to do to get within it. Um, and this is what the product's going to cost. We're going to get you there. Here's how long it's going to take. We got to start money right away." And they said, "No, no, it's fine. We're too small.
Right.
We would never be hit by that." And we ended up canceling that client. Right? We said, "Well, if you don't want to implement it, we're going to give you 45 days. And at that point, we are going to part ways with you." That's not an easy conversation, as we talked about before, but it's so necessary. And everyone thinks they're too small to be hit. I mean, that was kind of our bread and butter at Datto, right? I mean, we talked all the time to. We had a woman up in Ottawa, Canada, who ran a dog rescue out of her house, and her website was locked down with ransomware.
Yep.
And everything she had, the contacts, all the different resources she had, everything was on this one computer. The website manager was on the computer, everything, where she uploaded the pictures of the new dogs she had. I mean, this woman made no profit. She was an animal lover who, in her retirement, decided to dedicate her time to saving stray dogs and dogs at shelters and fostering them and helping them find new homes, and was just an absolute saint. And her website was locked down, and her whole business was completely halted because of you know a bad email click. You're never too small. The
Well,
reality is
and
it's a spray and pray game.
well, and what's the data? What's the value of the data to you, right? Because ultimately, a lot of these SMBs, they think that they're too small to for anybody to care about them because, well, who would want my data? Who cares about what I'm doing or what would be the value of this? The craziest story I ever heard was an MSP told me that they were trying to secure a law firm, and the law firm basically was like a small, like 3-person firm. And the law firm basically said, if anything were to happen, I'll just declare bankruptcy and start up a new firm. Like, what can you do to help that person? Like, they're just
You
completely
can't.
oblivious to the real risks. But the fact of the matter is, what is the value of the data to you as a business? Because that is what the ransomware hinges on, right? It's
Agree.
not the value to anybody else. Your data could be worthless to the rest of the world, but if the data is valuable to you,
Mm-hmm.
then they'll know that they've got leverage on you if they hit you, and that is worth some amount of what amount of money is that worth? Do you really want to find out? Do you really want to find out in a real world scenario what that price tag is worth, or would you rather protect yourself proactively in advance, right? And that's some of the tough conversation is because these SMBs don't think there's anybody out there like that cares about them or is trying to seek them out. But it's because they're so open and exposed and vulnerable that they're liable to being hit.
There's a reason that RMMs have been, it's been way better, and the RMM companies have been really good about locking them down. But there's a reason that was a really valuable target to hackers. It was once I get there, it's a spray and pray because I'm just landing and expanding into all your clients. Um, you know, that's what it is, right? They're not saying, it's very rare that they're like, I specifically want to get Brandon Mitchell over at Threatlocker and I'm going to just
Right.
target him.
Exactly. Exactly.
It's, I'm going to hit any company that I can get. And if somebody clicks it, I want it to spread to all of their contacts and their email. That's why email was a huge target back in the 90s and the early 2000s. It's about spreading it as fast as I can and getting as many people as I can hit. It's very rare that they are, you know, an Ocean's 11 style heist on one
Right,
person.
right. Where this specifically targeted that business, and they did
Yeah.
all sorts of research on you, and they know, no, no, no. It's they're casting a wide net, and they're seeing who they can catch in it. I mean, that's what it is. Yeah.
Yep. I mean, these are run like businesses, right? There's probably SDRs that are getting as many people as they can. There's probably your more regional sales managers type that are probably targeting the more strategic acquisitions that they can get to.
Well,
But
and
I
it's
mean, that,
funny because we know, and I think a lot of the people who'd be listening to this podcast, this series know, but still, the vast majority of people out there in society don't realize that bad actors at ransomware is an industry. It's not, like we all play around with the hooded guy in the basement doing all sorts of like hacky stuff, right? And that's the stereotype. But the reality is they have help desk and they have tech support numbers and they're literal organizations that are being run partly because it's not been enough of a priority to stop that from spreading. And a lot of these SMBs don't realize the risk that they're at because they think it's still some underground, super secretive, thing between nation states that between governments and super high level organizations, and they hear about the MGM breaches, but they don't see the things that are happening in their local communities. They don't see the school districts being hit. They don't see the local clinics being hit, and they certainly don't think it could happen to their little bakery, right? Or to their dental
yep.
office, and that's when bad things happen, of course.
So I just quickly Googled in the background, off of ransomware attacks alone in 2023, a new record was hit of 1.1 billion. And you think about the fact that you have in that, that woman from Ottawa, right, who had the dog rescue, and this poor woman literally went in and she went back to them and she did say, hey, I don't have the money to pay this. I think they wanted like 15,000, and she said, I just don't have the money to pay that. And they said, okay, no problem. Could you do five? And they negotiated down with her to an
Yep.
amount that she could pay. This poor elderly woman had to leave her dog rescue, go to a seedy brothel, and use the Bitcoin ATM to get Bitcoins because she had no idea how to get Bitcoins. They helped her through that. Don't worry, their support department helped her through that, and she was able to pay out the ransom and got it back up and running. I think people donated because they wrote about her story in the local newspaper. Just very sad story, but the reality is anyone's a target. I think that everyone always relates back to the big news stories. Oh, a hospital was hit.
Yep.
The MGM casino was hit, right? It's stuff like that. And those are terrible. And those are big. And yes, you hear about those because those are major, but you don't hear about every shooting in America, right? You don't hear about every carjacking in America. Um, we hear about we hear about if a celebrity gets carjacked? Absolutely. But does it mean that nobody else got carjacked that day? Absolutely not.
Right.
And that's kind of what I think you have to kind of pull yourself back down to earth and realize. And I think that MSPs have done a better job, or at least I've seen it over the years. Some of the MSPs that have done best with this are constantly keeping tabs on the news, right? They have RSS feeds set up and they're watching what's happening, and they're trying to pull some of those more normalized stories, like the woman in Ontario, right? pull those stories down that are not the major hospital. It's good to reference those, and if your partners are paying or your customers are paying any attention to the news, they've seen a lot of those. But how can you bring it back down to earth for them? Similarly to how you're dumbing down things like zero trust and other things like that for them.
Well, and that is a great, that's an excellent point, right? So this is where it does kind of circle back to Threatlocker, because there's also this conception that I would say misconception, honestly, that well, if what's the point of trying, right? Like it's almost like you're giving up, you're throwing in a towel before you even start, because it's a, well, if these large multinational conglomerates and corporations and governments can't protect themselves, what are we going to do, right? And it's really, that is where the change in mindset comes in. That is
Hmm.
fundamentally where there is no silver bullet in cybersecurity, and we all know this, and anybody who tries to tell you otherwise is selling you snake oil. But there are perspectives that you can take that will reduce your essentially your attack surface, reduce your risk, and that's all it
Yep.
is, right? One of my, away from cybersecurity for a moment, one of the things that I like to live my life by personally is, um, science is not trying to prove or ascertain anything for certain. It's simply the reduction of uncertainty. Like the accumulation of knowledge is simply becoming less and less and less uncertain and more confident in the results. Um, Cybersecurity, I think, needs to follow a similar trajectory. You're never going to get to a place where you can stop everything. That's not the idea. That is a losing game. What you'd like to do is get to a point where you are reducing the risk that you're taking on. And
Yep.
that is ultimately where Threatlocker comes into play, in trying to shift that mindset, shift that mentality away from the constant cat and mouse game of trying to stay on top of every new development and every new thing that ever comes out and keep out the bad, and more so like, let's take control of our digital environments, right?
Yep.
Ultimately, that is what Threatlocker is trying to do. Take control of the endpoint environment, just like you try to take control of your digital identity or digital footprint, just like anything else. It's you can't guarantee that nothing bad is ever going to happen, but by taking some steps to have control over what you're allowing in your environment in the first place, you can reduce your ability, or reduce the risk that you have of being hit. And if something were to occur, reduce the damage that the fallout that may occur from it. So
Yep.
that's the entire premise, not just behind the application control, the application allow listing, that binary, what's allowed in your environment, what's not, what's approved, what's denied, but then the ring fencing, right? That control of
Yep.
lateral movement. So if something is allowed in your environment, if something is, approved for whatever reason, and then ends up being compromised, well, that's where Threatlocker puts in constraints, puts in the ability to control that lateral movement and stop it from having access to your Windows core files, which is one of the most dangerous things that an application can have access to. So again, those that putting limitations, putting constraints, putting in rules, in a framework in place so that you are as protected as you can be.
So one thing you said in there that I really liked, was kind of about just focusing in on your clients and what you can do. And one of the things I thought of there was similar to being out there and understanding the stories and trying to pull those down. You should have your own stories, right? If I'm protecting dental practice over here and they get somebody attacks them, but because of what we put in place, they were unaffected. Cyber attacks are attempted every day, multiple hours, multiple times a minute. If one of your clients has been hit, that's a case study right there. I would package that up, redact everything about them, and I would go back and say, hey, this is what happened. This is a 10-person business down the road from you. I can't tell you who they are, but they are a partner of ours. And an attack was attempted on this level, this level, this level, this level. All of them were blocked because we were using Threatlocker, or we use a combination of these tools. I mean, we look at the MGM hack that happened at late last year. That was major. Obviously, took down Vegas for I think almost a week. That was off of a simple somebody called in and nobody verified who that person was, and authorized password reset and blew up everything, cost untold amounts of money. That was as simple as verifying who somebody was over the phone. It's crazy to me that you touched on, everyone always thinks, oh well, if a huge organization gets hit, then how can I be protected? Well, that's because that huge organization didn't have the right processes in place. You could be a 10-person dental firm down the road and have better security
Yep.
practices than a major casino.
And
The
that giant organization is still ultimately made up of human beings,
Yep,
right? And that's really what it is putting those safeguards, putting those parameters, putting those um, you know, the safety railings into place more or less to protect you. And there are large organizations that need to learn those lessons as well. But
yep,
why would you as a small business um, it'd be kind of like it's one thing if you were driving automobiles before the implementation of the seatbelt, right?
yeah,
Um, and that was something where regulation came in and started telling people they need to be wearing seatbelts because this actually saves lives and this works. But now, decades, in the modern era, um, everyone kind of knows that if they're not putting on their seatbelt, they are taking on a major person risk. Everyone understands
yep.
that there is reason that we have this thing called a seatbelt. And it's the same thing on cybersecurity. It's less familiar because it's so new. Like, how old is the internet? Like 30 years at this point,
Yeah.
roughly. In the 1992, 1993, like ARPANET, right? I mean, this is really, in human terms, this is still a really, really, really new development. We're still wrapping our heads around the substantial changes that have come to our society just in the last 3 decades. And our behaviors often don't evolve in lockstep with our technological advancements. And that's what's happening here is
100%.
we're still trying to figure out how to move about in a digital space safely. Um, and there's going to be a lot of trial and error with that. Um, and it's going to be a bumpy road, but this is where the MSP has a really important and critical role to play.
Agreed. No, it's definitely it's a huge responsibility, but it's a cool one, right? I think that's the thing that we watch, that evolution of MSPs being the person that was called when the keyboard breaks, to being the person that was called when, hey, I think I have a virus. I heard about this on, Dateline. Can you take a look at my computer? It was you or Staples. To now, okay, you're becoming the true advisor, right? You're telling them, it's your job to explain to them what ransomware is well before they hear about it on the nightly news because the hospital was hit. You are supposed to be at the forefront and educating your clients, and education has to be a major piece of everything you do. You touched on it earlier. It has to be regular too, right? Quarterly business reviews, larger annual business reviews. You should be in the room as their, quasi CTO, helping guide them to find budgets for the following year, suggest budgets for the following year. Like, all of that needs to be part of your process. If you just retain yourself to being the person that is waiting for them to call you when something breaks, you will be replaced. And the person that will guide them into that next era and protect them from the next threat or the next piece that comes up will be the one that will help them, continue on their journey.
Yep. And I think that brings us kind of full circle. My experience as an MSP sales rep for Threatlocker, you know, we're not going to win every conversation that we engage in,
Of
but
course.
that's what makes my job so rewarding is just like we are encouraging the MSPs to have the conversations with the end users, that is literally my job is to talk to MSPs day in and day out and help them with their problems. And yeah, it's always nice when we come across an MSP that just gets it. Like we all love that, just like the MSP loves it when they have the customer that just listens to everything they say. That's awesome.
Yep.
It's a great experience. But let's be real, that's not normally the case, right? And so it's education, it's consultation, and that's what makes being in this space kind of very rewarding at the end of the day.
So no, I appreciate it. And honestly, Brendan, this has been a great session. Um, your team can be seen at any possible channel event that is coming
Yeah,
up in the near future.
yeah,
So if anybody listened to this and said, "Hey, I got to find out about the EDR, MDR, about Threatlocker Detect, or about the core solution," I would encourage you stop by the booth, talk to their team. A lot of great people. They are great knowledge base on what's going on out there, and a wealth of knowledge in that. So I would definitely encourage you to take a look, talk to our friends over there. And if you need anything in the meantime, Brandon, what's a great way to get a hold of you?
Brandon.mitchell@threatlocker.com. The next big event is obviously IT Nation Secure right in our backyard of Orlando here.
Yep.
So if anybody's at IT Nation Secure, as Alex stated, just stop by our booth. I personally will be at PAX 8 Beyond. So the following week, if anybody sees me and recognizes me, track me down and feel free to have a conversation. That'd be awesome.
Awesome. Well, Brendan, again, I appreciate it. If anybody has any questions after this, hit Brendan over on or myself over on LinkedIn. Brendan just gave out his info, so feel free to email him, and we will hopefully talk to you guys all soon. And Brendan and I should see some of you at PAX 8 Beyond. Talk to you soon. Thanks again, Brendan.
Thank you, Alex.